No, a lot of people actually do.
Fine.
It just looks like someone else's hand. It's like a different colour and a different size.
Maybe it is. Maybe they just chop mine off and put
The
it in
surgeon's
your
like, fuck, you've got a sweet new ginger hand now.
I would call it a sweet new ginger hand.
Hello. This is going to be no buffalo for you.
Yeah. Not necessarily in any particular order. I want to talk about post-workout meals, post-workout carbs, like potential importance of it in like CrossFit setting and outside of CrossFit setting, intermittent fasting, anabolic windows, carb loading maybe, protein synthesis, so like anabolism versus catabolism.
Can I make a suggestion?
Hey.
I think the structure of this should be because all of our days are very similar, where we all wake up quite early, we have some work, but then then we train, and then we have like lunch and meals after. So I think we should work through this chronologically. So start by day, because it's all about meal timing, right? So let's start with like breakfast and meal timing, and then it can be like, what do we do in terms of meal timing? Makes sense. Like how soon, how long after waking, and then like where might intermittent. Then I think we can talk about other strategies at the end. Like, okay, what about things like
more
intermittent
performance
fasting?
and stuff.
You can talk about like, what about intermittent fasting?
Yeah.
Bloody blah. Like things that we think about with regards to timing and why. So for example, like.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense in terms of like, the structure of it. Yeah.
The structure. We just run through the day that way.
Yeah, and then within that we can talk about like, so I like to have quite a high fat breakfast with like a good protein source because it fills me up a little bit more.
Exactly.
Breakfast, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like it.
Yeah. And like he times it. You got like 2 to 3 hours between each meal. I only have 3 meals a day.
I have 4.
You're 4. So we've got 3 different 6, and we should talk about that.
Not on a Saturday, because Saturday is treat day. Okay.
Look at me now.
Look at me now. Consume.
We'll save your big hand catch up.
Yeah, no catch up. We're just gonna go balls deep.
Yeah.
Straight in, no lube.
Yeah.
Have you pressed play on that?
Yes. Make sure you edit that out.
Okay, ready? And we're going bounding. Welcome to the Lift Perform.
You've had all this pent up. I've been
going
energy.
so
like,
weird
fuck,
on my own.
to get this out.
You're sitting in a circle like.
Bounding. Oh, okay, we're fine. Well, fine. None of that stuff. Welcome to this week's episode of the Live, Perform, Compete podcast. I am joined by Ed and Ant. Hello, both of you.
Hello, Patrick.
Hello, Patrick. Welcome back.
Thanks. It's good to be back.
You're looking good.
Yeah. Feel good. Felt better, but
Some context, listeners. This is Paddy's first day back in the office after falling off a waterfall and having a surgery done on his arm. So right now, myself and Ant are looking at Paddy in a very average-looking sling, with a hand that looks like it's not his because it's a different colour and a completely different shape to the rest of his body. But anyway, Paddy's in great spirits. We're going to talk about your hand and the accident in another episode.
yes,
But it's great to see you again, Paddy.
another time. It's great to be back, guys.
Something else we should also mention is Paddy has a lot of pent-up weirdness that he's had to keep to himself for the last 4 days that he may bring out.
Essentially been in isolation for the last week, so
We've had a quick sneak peek at some of that weirdness, so apologies if some of that comes out in this episode.
yeah, I apologise as well. Sorry, Mum. Anyway, today is going into part 4 of our nutrition series, working our way up the nutrition pyramid. So we've talked about energy balance, we've talked about macronutrients, micronutrients, and now we're going to be talking about nutrient timing or meal frequency. And basically how we're going to go through that structure is we're going to run through our days, talk about where we have differences, similarities of timings when we eat, and then reasons behind what we're eating, why we're eating it, when we're eating it, and then we'll probably end up sidetracking and going off different topics as we go.
Yeah, I think just to bring listeners back into why we're doing this, the food pyramid. Essentially, we've done 3 episodes already where we talk about the most important thing: energy balance, or calories in versus calories out. And then as we work our way through these episodes, we're just simply working to the next level of the pyramid, which is less important than the one preceding it. So I think meal timing is an interesting one, because I think people talk about meal timing a lot, especially people in the training world. They think that that timing is a really important thing. When to time your pre and post workout shakes, when to time your meals pre and post workouts. Everything kind of surrounds the workout window. Then of course, like in the health world, we've got intermittent fasting and all that kind of stuff, which definitely falls within meal timing. So I think this is an interesting one. I know that the 3 of us have slightly different ways that we go about timing our meals each day, and I'm sure we'll get into why we make the choices that we do.
Yeah. So just like as we've talked about for the last 3 episodes previous, make sure that you're ticking off those foundational elements first before you're trying to worry about, as our final episode is next time is going to be on supplementation, and people are so keen to jump the bandwagon on things like you said, pre and post workout meals and what supplements they need to be taking when they haven't even figured out what energy balance or what their goals are for their energy balance and macronutrients, etc. So cool. So let's start with first meal of the day. Anthony,
Hello.
Well, you usually wake up like 5:30 when you're not.
Regular day I'm generally about 6 o'clock. If I need to wake up any earlier, then it'll be 5:30, 5 o'clock. I think first thing, it's good to be on this little series. Obviously listened in with the ones that you guys have done and the ones with Tammy as well. And I think it's important for listeners to know that who don't know who I am, that pretty much everything that I do with my meal timing is performance based. It is not a lifestyle based thing. It's basically it is a lifestyle based thing, but everything I do is to try and improve my performance inside of the gym. That also of course goes hand in hand with improving things that could potentially help with recovery, sleep quality, sleep length, and all that sort of stuff. So that's always taken into consideration when I'm trying to think about my food.
Sorry, just to dive into that, is that for you and I, Ed, it's much more kind of like what suits us. Obviously, we're thinking about performance as well, but it's more kind of like what fits in with our schedule, or like where we like to eat, because that's what we like to eat when we like to eat it, as opposed to it being that much more optimal. Whereas you're
Doner kebabs and pizzas for you, innit?
Yeah, you got it, mate. Especially now. That delivery order's getting heavy.
I think it's a really good place for you to introduce, the context of what you're about to share in this episode.
Yeah.
Like I watch you eat, and it's like you eat for purpose. The way that I eat a meal looks very different to the way you eat it.
Yeah.
But also, just the amount of calories you have to get in a day to support your training pursuit means you have to be eating a lot more.
Yeah.
Which means you don't have necessarily big chunks of time to just sit and enjoy a meal.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah.
Yeah, you're always spoon and shoveling in when you can, whereas Ed's like, well, I want 23 chews per mouthful while meditating.
Well, that's why I commonly go for the fried rice choice versus a piece of meat, so it's really chopped up.
Yeah, exactly.
On to breakfast. So generally my breakfast is the first thing I have in the morning. I'll normally have a drink or so with the Himalayan salt and lemon juice in there. But my first meal of the day is definitely protein, carb heavy. There's obviously some fat in there as well. So I generally have 2 pieces of bacon, 2 eggs, a muffin, sliced in half, English muffin, all cooked in butter. And then I will have some oats, 150 grams of oats. I'll have 4 figs, which are dried figs because they last longer and they're cheaper. I'll then have some honey on there and some cinnamon and some lactose-free milk. I'm Asian, I can't take any lactose, so lactose-free milk. Yeah.
So the reason for you having that breakfast, Andy, is why? So most people probably listen to that and think it's quite a big breakfast.
Yeah.
What is the rest of your day now looking like in that morning?
Well, I mean, I actually didn't used to eat breakfast. I used to come in and actually think it was a cool thing that I was going to train fasted about 6 hours after my 6 hours of work, or 4 hours of work and 2 hours of being awake. And I was actually totally fine, honestly, for about 3 months. And I got to like a 3.5 month mark, and I would have to take myself to the toilet, rest my head on the door frame, and be like, do I have enough energy? And if I could open my eyes in the next 5 seconds, then I would train really hard. And if I couldn't open my eyes in the next 5 seconds, I would go have a sleep on the sofa. And it was just like, I don't know what I was doing. Like at the time, honestly, I wasn't very knowledgeable with it. And I just thought that that was probably a way for me to be a bit leaner and look a bit more shredded, and my performance is more mental based, I think, is what was probably going through my head at the time. Yeah, so the reason why my breakfast is so big is because I need to be satisfied, obviously, before I make my trip to the gym. That's normally about an hour before I leave the home anyway. My mornings will generally start with anywhere between 2 to 3 hours of work. So that's obviously on the floor, on my feet, doing something. So we're looking at probably anywhere between 3 to 5 hours before the next thing that is of substance is going into my body, really. And that's not including water and electrolytes. So we're talking a protein shake or the next meal. So I need a lot to basically keep me satisfied and to keep me ticking over in that time, because I'm also going to train in that window as well. So that's why I'll have a fairly high fat with the bacon and the eggs and the butter. But also, of course, your oats have a bit of fat in there as well. And the carbohydrates, totally necessary for someone like me who are doing double sessions in a day, which are both lasting a minimum of 90 minutes, up to 2 hours sometimes. And of course, in this sport, CrossFit is really an endurance sport. Of course, you can have your strength sessions and whatnot, but generally it is an endurance sport.
Yeah, I think it's important to actually talk about the idea of fasted cardio, fasted training.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I remember when you were doing fasted training, it was actually a thing that a lot of coaches were talking about at the time.
Yeah.
Will say that the benefits for fasted. I think the context was fasted aerobic training.
Yeah.
But as CrossFitters, we just took it in and said fasted any training was a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of science to show now that, you know, a lot of people experiment with fasted training because of the fat burning properties of it, or the benefits of it. And you know, there's a lot of research now that shows that yes, in the actual session when you're training fasted, you can actually be burning more fat stores. But if you actually want to burn fat, a greater amount of fat throughout your day, not doing fasted training is actually a much better option, because what you actually do is in the training session itself, when you're not fasted, you're burning carbohydrates as your fuel source, but then you're setting yourself up to burn fat for the rest of the day. When you do fasted training, in the session itself, you're burning fat, but for the rest of the day, you're actually burning carbohydrates.
Yeah, and something to add on to that as well is that you're burning fat, yes, but it's not subcutaneous fat that's like sitting around your belly or your love handles or your bingo wings or whatever. It's the fat that's available in your gut, or you know, in your body, in whatever you consume that morning, for example, or the previous evenings, as opposed to body fat itself that you're trying to get rid of because you want to look leaner.
Yeah.
Which is where people were like, oh my god, I'm burning so much fat. And it's like, yeah, but that's just from the bacon that you ate last night or whatever.
Yeah. So I think in summary, what you're saying, you stack a pretty big meal in the morning, because you then got 2 or 3 hours where you're actually working, and then you're moving into a pretty hard training session, and then you start your training session.
Yeah, so my breakfast is generally about 1,000, just under 1,500 calories.
And what's the macros?
I can get that up for you in a sec. I'll go grab that. But it's again in the grand scheme of my day, I need a lot in the morning, because I'm gonna have, like you said, it's more for the actual fact that I need to get my macronutrients in by the end of the day, and that total calorie number.
Yeah.
So if I had a small breakfast, I'd immediately be playing catch up after that.
Yeah.
See, like on the days I've sometimes been a bit rushed because I've been ill prepared when I've left the house, or you know, it's been a different 5:15 start because we're covering for someone, whatever the case might be. I've then ended up bringing my second meal, which I call my oats, but I actually have it in one sitting. But then I'll basically bring that to the gym, and I only get through half of it, and then I can feel the difference of that like immediately in the preceding 2, 3, 4 hours after that, and I'm like, feel like my stomach's eating away at itself, and that's when you'll sometimes see me run upstairs and have my post-workout shake during my intra-workout.
Yeah, I think I'll jump in then. So I think my morning routine is pretty similar to yours. So I'm at the moment waking up about 5:30, and then I'd say within 20 minutes of waking up, I'm eating my breakfast. My breakfast is generally I think breakfast, lunch, and dinner are all roughly the same size. I won't get into macros, but I stack a pretty big meal in the morning. It's pretty dense in protein, pretty dense in carbohydrates, definitely a fair amount of fat in there. But that's because if I'm eating that at about 6 a.m, I'm training at about 10:15. We all train together at 10:15 a.m. every day, and so I know that meal has to get me through essentially 4 and a bit hours, and then, you know, I don't take a pre-workout supplement either. So essentially, if I extend my training sessions about an hour and a half long or an hour long, that meal has to basically satisfy me through to my post-workout shake, which we'll talk about next. And that's because, you know, once my day starts and I'm rolling through work, meetings, clients, programming, I don't really create the time to be eating more meals. So I'd much rather just stack a much bigger meal at the start of the day, hold on and basically till lunchtime.
Do you feel a wave of hunger at any point with that during that time period?
Recently I have. Only just recently, because I think I've started
biking into work,
cycling to work, and I just think generally speaking, I'm putting together a pretty good streak of consistent training at the moment, and I've just actually started reverse dieting a little bit by upping my calories again, having gone through a bit of a fat loss phase, and I think just my metabolism is picking up a little bit now, so I've actually just bumped up carbohydrates by about 20 to 30 grams a day now. So only just in the last week was I starting to get hungry in that mid-morning. But generally speaking, no, like I feel actually really good, really energized, don't really get hungry until I finish my workout.
So for me, if I try and eat a larger breakfast where, like we've talked about in our morning routines podcast, where you're having like that meaty, eggy, portion of food, and then also like the carb heavy, like we both all have that, like you have chicken, weirdo. You have like.
What was your vote on that, by the way?
Oh, it's like 60-40 weirdo.
Are you sure it's weirdo?
100%. I'll get it up for you.
Sure?
We're using my phone camera to video it. You're
60-40 is not bad. I was expecting an 80-20.
There were like 70-80 votes.
I had a few people messaging me saying, by the way, I voted for me. There's only about 2 people.
Brown nose.
Yeah.
So for me, even if I eat that like a larger meal where I'm having the carb heavy meal with my like eggs and bacon or whatever, I'll still get a wave of hunger at like 9-10 o'clock. So what I'm doing now, and I have been doing for the last month or so, is having like the muffin style thing, or like a wrap or a bagel or a muffin with eggs and bacon and stuff. And then I'll have my oats at 9, and that's working really well for me.
So what's the gap between those 2 meals?
Like 2.5 hours, 3 hours tops. So I'll literally wake up and eat eggs and bacon in a wrap or something, and then at 8:30, 9 o'clock, I'll have my oats when I feel that hunger again, and then I train at 10 and I feel great.
Yeah.
So yeah, all similar in terms, similar in terms of like calories, and I know mine's about like 1,100 calories.
Yeah, about roughly.
Mine's sitting on 1,465 calories, 220 grams of carbohydrates, 41 grams of fat, and 62 grams of protein.
I think another thing that really differs between us is that after eating breakfast, between breakfast and training, for me, a lot of it is like I'm quite sedentary. Some days I coach probably 2 hours of clients and coaches. Otherwise, I'm sat in front of a computer, programming or working, or I'm in meetings. Whereas I think you two are actually more on the coaching floor in that morning.
Yeah.
Which means you're just generally moving a lot more.
Yeah, true.
And I think we have to factor that in because, you know, talk about needs all the time, the amount of calories we're burning, not through exercise. You know, we just talked about the other day. Yeah. We were covering the 5:15 classes.
6 kilometers.
Yeah.
3 hours.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, hitting almost 20,000 steps. Just doing 3 hours of coaching in the morning.
Just marching.
20,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was doing those Tuesdays, I was running in and out of the gym on the road.
Wow, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, even on my Mondays and Fridays, I'm at 19,000 afterwards.
Yeah.
And so that made a massive difference. You know, when I would finish those coaching hours, I'd be starving. And so then I had to eat a little something before training. So I think
a little something. Yeah, cool. So that takes us up to workout. Do you take anything? Obviously, you sometimes have a Nocco or like some caffeine to like pre-workout. You don't, do you, Ed? No.
No, I went through a phase of branched amino acids when I was actually sponsored by Nocco.
Not anymore.
when I got binned, I stopped taking. No, I mean, I think that
cut the lowest hanging fruit.
We can have totally. We made the right call for sure. But I think we can also talk about the validity of that. In fact, that'll be our next episode of supplementation. So no, I don't take pre-workout. Also, I'm a 1 coffee a day guy as well. I've coffee with breakfast. I don't have any more stimulant for caffeine.
Yeah, I'm very similar. I used to be a coffee in the morning upon waking, and then caffeine, a Nocco, which is 180 milligrams of caffeine before my first session, then a Nocco or a coffee before my second session. But it was more habitual versus me needing it.
Yeah.
I also think in that time since I've done that, I've also taken my sleep a lot more seriously. So I was probably, to an extent, sleep deprived. So I did need that caffeine. And again, this is obviously the next podcast as well. But Yeah, I don't take anything pre-workout for the second session, which is generally around 2 to 3 p.m. My first session, if I've had a coffee upon waking, I won't have another hit of caffeine. But if I've not had that coffee in the morning, just because, again, like, I just have coffee because I enjoy the coffee.
You just say that you sometimes forget to make your coffee.
Yeah, I don't need the caffeine hit in the morning. I actually just enjoy the process of it. But yeah, sometimes I just forget to make it. And if I do forget, then I'm just like, oh, well, I've kind of earned myself a knocker, so I'll have that instead.
Yeah.
But it's not like a necessity in my life. I don't need it, no.
Yes, I'm in the same boat.
Maybe I do need it. Maybe I'll lift more if I actually start taking caffeine.
We'll see. It's very well researched allergenic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was the same. Like I was like chugging a litre cafetiere of coffee over the space of a morning, and then would have like more in the afternoon. Didn't notice a massive impact on my sleep, but just like that next coffee that I had, if I had one first thing in the morning and then one later on, I'd feel like even like straight after, you know, when you're supposed to feel good with the buzz, I was like, I feel a bit sick and like heart palpitations, stuff like that. It's just like
afternoon coffees are horrendous for me.
or even like when we go for a swim and then because we both just enjoy having a coffee, we'll go and have another one at 10 and then we'll be like, oh, I should feel rough.
Yeah, it makes you feel terrible. Like a second coffee just doesn't make me feel great at all.
Yeah. Anyway, so nothing pre-workout really.
Pre-workout. No intra.
Have you tried that in the past?
Yeah.
I know you said BCAAs. Have you tried intra?
Yeah, I went through a phase of intra-workout carbs, so it'd be kind of 20.
That means during, guys.
So yeah, so I'd probably start sipping on so I'd be using dextrose and maltodextrin with some amino acids,
Which is basically sugar.
just basically sugar, yeah.
Sugar on sugar.
And I would, as I started my warm up, start sipping on it, so just make one shaker. And as I would basically be about halfway through my session, I made sure I finished it. So I mean, I definitely felt good at it, but I was also probably I was training a little bit more. My coaching hours were definitely a lot more then, so I was generating my NEAT score. I was a lot more active in the day, and so I'd probably say my overall carbohydrate intake on a daily basis then, and this was a few years ago, was probably 60 grams higher than it is now. And so I just can't get those 60 grams into my lunchbox as my breakfast, so I'd have the intra workout carbs, but now no.
For me, sometimes I will never have it on a day where it's actually probably needed more. So like a big aerobic day. My Tuesdays I do a lot of like aerobic work in the morning, which is more CrossFit style, and my afternoon session is more running. So I would say there's probably more validity for me to get in, like Ed was saying there, some intra-workout carbohydrates.
Sure.
But actually I have it more so now on a Monday, a Wednesday or a Friday morning session, which is generally more strength biased work. But it's just more because I'm a bit hungry. And on the last 2 Friday mornings I've been taking a 5:15 shift. And then I haven't eaten really until 12:30. So basically like the 10:30, 11 o'clock mark, I'm having my, normally a post-workout shake, but I'm just having an intro. So that has 40 grams of protein and 70 grams of carbohydrates in it. So that's like, for most people, that's like almost 2 meals. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, you Paddy, you do anything?
No, so one thing I was going to ask you is like when you've done longer endurance pieces, have you tried taking carbs during, like whether it's like a Dexter shake or like sweets and stuff like that?
So when I did my marathon row, which was just under 3 hours, what did I have? I had 50 grams of cyclic dextrin. So I mean, dextrose and maltodextrin, pretty much the same thing. I had 50 grams of that every 5,000.
50 grams of carbs.
50 grams of that, which ended up being about 45 grams of carbs.
Okay.
Yeah, I ended up having that every, I think, 5,000 meters at road. So that's, I'm having that six to
sort of
7
like 30
times
minutes.
throughout. Yeah, exactly. So that was a lot, but I still felt like there was not enough when I was doing it.
Yeah, so from doing some endurance stuff and having worked with a nutritionist when I was doing it, it was like if you're doing 1 hour of exercise, you want 30 to 60 grams of carbs per half an hour. If you're doing 1 to 2 hours,
This is a continuous aerobic exercise.
yeah. So if you were going to do like a 4, 6, 8 hour run, bike, whatever. And then like 1 to 2 hours, it was 60 to 90 grams of carbs per 30 minutes. And then 2 hours plus 90 plus grams of carbs per half an hour. So you're like slamming like an aggressive amount of carbohydrates non-stop pretty much. And when I've actually adhered to that, when I've done longer endurance stuff, like you feel a big difference.
Oh, yeah, big
so
time.
like doing 45 grams of carbs, that probably barely touched the sides for you.
No.
With how much and rowing as well, like it's taxing
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, no, I haven't done anything recently, but the only time that I've done intra has been purely carbs, and it's been for like longer endurance pieces, and I have noticed a big difference in that. But like if you're doing a 60 to a 90-minute session, you're probably not even getting close to 50% glycogen depletion, where your carb stores in your body are actually getting too low to the point where you're not able to exert much energy. So you don't really need to worry about any sort of carbohydrates during, unless you're hungry or you feel like a bit of brain fog or something like that.
Yeah, so I think something we've all talked about now is using hunger as a determining factor as to whether we might add an additional something before we start training. What are your general takes on training, going into a training session hungry? Do you do it or do you not do it?
It doesn't bother me if it's a strength session. I don't mind. I'd rather be full versus hungry in a session, simply because I know that I need to train quite hard.
I guess it depends what the session is.
Yeah, if I'm going into a running session, I'd rather probably be on the side of hungry versus stuffed, and I can feel like an elephant on there. Yeah.
You're full.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but again, like right now in the season, I don't have many of those sessions, so I'd rather go into it full. Whereas I know if I'm in a competition, for example, it would be the opposite. I'd rather not eat all day. I'd live off powders and liquids, and that would keep me taking over.
Your hunger signals aren't really firing on competition.
No, exactly. Yeah.
I hate going into a training session feeling hungry. I find it's just a distraction for my mind, and obviously if I do find I'm going into a session I'm already feeling hungry, I'll just prioritize carbohydrates. And so like I think just on doing the aerobic Tuesday session of the day, I was warming up, we were just about to start, and I was like, lads, I'm starving. So I ran to Welcome and bought just an Equate, like a Pocari, just to get 30 grams of carbs in.
And like a banana or something.
Yeah, and I actually felt really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I generally don't like training.
Yeah, I'd probably say the same. Like, I think for me it's more psychological rather than physiological. Like, it's not going to make much of a difference in a 90-minute strength session, especially at the intensity that I'm training at. So like, it's more like, oh, I feel hungry, I'll probably end up sandbagging this like cardio that I've got to do at the end, as opposed to it actually physiologically having an impact on me. It's more like me telling myself, oh, because I'm hungry, I haven't eaten enough, therefore I'm probably not going to be able to do as well. Maybe I'll like take that split time down a little bit or something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so we've trained. Great. Well done.
Patrick, start with you. What are you doing post-workout? What immediately goes in your mouth, and what's the next? Maybe what goes immediately in your mouth and the next 2 hours after? What's so funny?
No, don't worry.
You don't want to know what goes in his mouth.
Okay.
Post-workout shake for sure. So it'll just be some like whey isolate, 2 scoops of whey isolate.
How soon after?
Within about 10 minutes. With water, some creatine, and in the past as well, I've been doing beta-alanine as well.
Yeah.
And that's it.
So that's
No
immediate.
carbs.
That's immediately 10 minutes after.
Yeah.
Then when's your next meal going in?
So it actually does fluctuate sometimes because my schedule around lunchtime will vary on clients and classes. So usually ideally I would like to eat around 90 minutes after that to 2 hours. That's when I start to feel the hunger. But yeah, that's ideally when but sometimes it might be like 3 hours. But usually it's between 90 minutes to 2 hours. I'll then have a meal that would just be like chicken, rice, veggies, or
Carbs, and the fats, balanced meal.
yeah.
And post-workout?
Yeah, so like that shake that I was saying, I sometimes have intra, so I have 35 to 40 grams of protein, whey isolate as well. And then I would have anywhere between 65 to 70 grams of carbohydrate through cyclic dextrin. Within that, creatine, beta-alanine. Then that's immediate. Like as soon as I finish packing my weights away, I'm upstairs. I'm making a shake. If I need to do any stretching and stuff, then I'll take my shake downstairs to do that. But so that's pretty much immediate. I'll then heat my meal up, and normally then head out of the gym, and then try to sit outside away from the gym for at least 20 minutes before then I start eating my next meal. And again, that's a lot of the time. It's not like I'm starving, I need food in me because I've just had a pretty big shake, but it's more like I know I'm going to have a session within the next 2 or 3 hours. I need to make sure that I'm going to be satisfied and not feeling that hunger that you guys are talking about before as I hit my next session.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so I basically do exactly the same as you guys. The general principle is that the workout finishes, get the shake in as soon as I can, and then I generally eat a meal 60 to 90 minutes after. But so a couple of times, sometimes I'll actually flip-flop between which goes into my mouth first. So, this week I had a few, it was either a meeting or a client within 30 minutes of finishing training. And so training would finish about 12, but I wouldn't feel like I could actually stomach a whole meal. So that's when I would just have a shake, get the shake in, go through the next couple of hours of work, and then eat my meal. But then I've also had another time when just happened last week as well. I also had just a 30-minute window after training, but then I had 3 hours of work back to back to back. And I knew that if I just had my shake like I would normally have, I'd get halfway through that work stint and be starving. And so in that instance, even though it wasn't ideal to be having a full meal, because post-workout, our digestive system isn't really primed to be digesting food, right? The blood's all over our body, repairing tissues and sending oxygen around to the working cells. We know that the digestive system needs blood to digest food. Generally speaking, for a lot of people, they wolf food straight down after training to get indigestion and gas and bloatedness later. But in that scenario, I didn't want to just have a shake. It'd go through 3 hours without more food in my stomach and then start struggling for the afternoon. So I then kind of forced the meal down me, went through the 3 hours of work, and then ended up having my post-workout shake kind of mid-afternoon.
You could have also had that during your client's much more acceptable to have a protein shake.
Yeah,
eating a meal with your
for
clients.
sure. But I also know that the process of making the shake takes 5 minutes, and when you got 3 back-to-back hours, you don't really have that time.
Yeah.
And also, just not really a fan of eating or drinking with a client.
Yeah.
So yeah, in which case most people would say, well, why you're having a post-workout shake mid-afternoon, but then by that point I'm just looking at it from a macronutrient and calories perspective. I need to get my protein in. I kind of want to get the supplementation I normally take, which is creatine and glutamine. I want to get that into my day. Does it really matter when it comes? No, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, I'm still hitting my energy balance and my macronutrients, which is the first 2 levels of pyramid.
And you weren't in a fasted state before it as well, which is probably quite important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So this is now where you differ from us slightly, Anne, because you'll have 2 smaller meals, won't you?
So I've eaten the first of my 3 lunch boxes that I brought in at this point. So I finished my training, had my post-workout shake, had my first meal. I'll then either have a client or I'll be doing work on the computer. Then I'll go downstairs. I'll do my next training session, which again is anywhere between 60 to 120 minutes long. I'll then have another post-workout shake, which is exactly the same as what I had in the other one. So again, 30 to 40 grams of protein, anywhere between 65 to 70 grams of carbs, without the creatine and beta-alanine this time. And then I would then have, again, pretty much within 30 to 60 minutes of that shake, I would have another meal, which is my second lunch box. And then I'll then go into some clients after that. So we're looking at the 4 to 5 o'clock mark. I'm having the next post-workout and next lunch box.
So I think it's good for listeners to know that the lunch boxes that you have are generally a little bit smaller. You're generally sticking to rice as your main carbohydrate.
Yeah.
Your protein is generally all kind of chopped up, so it's much easier just to eat and digest. I think that's important because you only really have, and most of your time, I think you only have 5 to 10 minutes to get your meal in.
Yeah.
And if you're going for a steak and pasta, it's just a hard meal to get in you and digest and break down quickly. So you're actually being smart with the food you're creating, so you can actually.
Yeah. So I mean, I normally have 250 grams of rice. Let's assume half a tablespoon of oil in there for the cooking, and then anywhere something between chicken, which is either roast or just stir fried, and then normally shrimp or maybe chopped up pork. So that will leave me generally anywhere between 5 to 650 calories, which is about 71 grams of carbs, about 15 grams.
And that's tying you over to dinner now.
No.
So this is your mid-afternoon 4 p.m.
Yeah. And then after that, I'll then have my work, which is generally 2 to 3 hours long, and then at the 7 to 8 o'clock mark, I have my third lunch box still at the gym, which is again the same size. So by this point, I've generally consumed about 750 grams of cooked rice.
But then on days when you're not in the gym, will you have your dinner at that time as well? 7 to 8.
So no, yeah. So my dinner would be earlier in the days that I'm on, but pretty much Monday to Friday I'm there at that time. So then I'd have my third lunchbox, and then I would make my trip home. And by the time I got home, I'd be a little bit hungry. So then I would finish off my calories for the day, whatever they are. Generally, my protein is pretty much close to being done, but I'll normally have anywhere between like 30 to 70 grams of carbohydrates. It just depends on what I put in my shake, really.
So I guess a question for you is, so your day is looking like you've got 6 individual meals.
Yeah.
You've got sometimes a pre or intra shake. You've got a post-workout shake.
Yeah.
What's the reason for you separating the calories you need to get in a day into those 6 different meals?
I just don't want to stomach any more than that because
At one time.
At one time, yeah, because already having that post-workout shake, which for a lot of people would be horrendous for them to try and neck down.
Yeah.
That's why I used to have them, for people that didn't know, I used to have them as 2, a carb shake and a protein shake. And then I would really, really struggle to then eat my meal after that. So now I've literally gotten to the point where I couldn't care less what it tastes like. And I just put it all together in one big thing and just neck it basically as fast as I can. It's all pre-digested, and hopefully it does the same thing. So I just get that down me as quick as I can and let that settle, like I said, for like 30 to 45 minutes, and then I'm eating basically straight away. And I don't want really any more. I know you have a bigger lunch than I do, but my 3 lunch boxes are bigger than yours. We all put together.
I think as well, if compare what you eat to a lot of other athletes who are in the same position as you actually, which I think is a good thing. You eat more for sure. That's because you're very dialed in with nutrition, and this is something you've been tracking for a really long time. So I know your overall calorie intake has just been increasing every single year that you build your base. But I think also you do generally stick to whole foods a lot more than a lot of high level athletes, which I think is a good thing. I think there's a pro and a con to it. The con to being that you just have to spend more of your day just eating all the time.
And more money.
More money, but there's definitely probably more of like a health. It's probably a healthier way to do it. Versus pre-digesting, a lot of pre-digested food.
All shakes and
all that kind of stuff. So your digestive system is probably in a slightly better place because of it, and that's just an option that you decide to go for.
I mean, I went through that stage of I basically just sacked off having any post-workout carbohydrates, and like I would just not have my meal, that third lunch box, and I'd get home and then have a third shake, basically to replace the 20 grams of protein roughly that I would have missed from that last meal. And then rather than having rice or potato or pasta, I'd just end up eating gummy snakes or like gummy bears, and that would be my carb source. And I was actually, honestly, like I was about the same. It wouldn't really make much of a difference to me. But I don't know, I prefer actually to have the meal and like feel the satiety, because I feel like when I have the shake and the gummies, I'd be lying in bed being like, oh, I could actually eat more of those. Yeah. Even though I've really tonked out my calories.
Yeah, I think I generally, for me for sure, I'm interested to hear what you think, Paddy, but I enjoy like proper food. So for me,
Pringles.
I rarely go for like empty junk calories. I don't really go for things like sweet or really calorie dense foods that are processed. I'd much rather just like have a big portion of rice or potatoes or pasta and like a big.
You like your beef and horseradish crisps, though.
I do like those.
Get that freaking.
Yeah, to the devil.
Just sorry, before we go into us, like another thing to talk about is one of the benefits why you're spacing your meals out. Is diving into the science a little bit. Is the protein synthesis, or you essentially being in an anabolic state throughout your day as opposed to a catabolic state.
He's got like a protein drip all day.
Yeah.
Constantly feeding the body.
If you were going to look at optimal, which is what you're trying to do, you want to make sure that probably every 2 to 4 hours you're getting a serving of protein in, which allows you to then be in a positive protein balance throughout the day, meaning that your body always has a small drip of protein within the bloodstream, within the gut, ready to be able to be used to then build, synthesize muscle, tissues, etc., to aid recovery and all that sort of stuff. So that's.
I was going to say also, I think there's science probably for and against having lots of small meals versus having big meals. So I think the science for having 3 big meals with bigger spaces between is that like your digestive system actually gets a bit of a break and a chance to detoxify. But then from an efficiency standpoint, having smaller meals constantly throughout the day might be more optimal in terms of absorption of your foods. But I think the key part here is that we're adaptive creatures. So you've been doing this for a really long time, man. 5 to 6 meals for a really long time, your body's going to adapt, your digestive system's going to adapt to be able to handle that amount of digestion and volume throughout a day. For anyone who's doing 3 meals a day right now and is hearing this and thinking, maybe it's better if I just swap to 6 meals a day. Like, your body's probably not going to like it at first. It's you have to honour that, like everything else. It's going to take some time for your body to adapt to that.
And on top of that as well, the psychological element as well is, for a lot of people, that would be too much food focus. They'd have to be setting alarms on their phone, and like you said, that's a habit that you've built that is completely subconscious for you. Every 5-6 meals over the course of the day, and you're not thinking about it. It's just like, oh, time for the next lunchbox. Or your body will even tell you that with your your ghrelin will start rumbling in your belly, and you'll be like, I need to eat again. Whereas someone that hasn't necessarily done that, they could then think they need to switch to those 6 meals a day, and then before you know it, they're obsessing about their calories way too much. Food focus gets too high, and
for sure.
So where for me, I eat that lunchbox usually 90 to 2 hours post workout after I've had my shake, and then for me it will just be, I might have a snack if I'm feeling a little bit hungry. Like at the moment I'm smashing Snickers, so I'll just have, like, maybe before I take, if I'm doing like 4, 5, 6 or 5, 6, 7 classes or PT clients, I'll probably have a Snickers before that, just give me a little bit of a carb boost, keeps me nice and hyperactive throughout the day, throughout the evening.
Don't forget your Coke Zero, mate.
Sometimes I have a Coke Zero as well. It's just like, it's like, oh,
I see us all have it every day.
yeah, just like shake your head.
That's smart.
Hey, sometimes you have a double bite though, which has got a bit more protein in it. They don't.
What?
Oh.
Double, I think double bite's amazing.
Compared to a Snickers.
Oh, compared to
Mate, go get a protein Snickers at least next time.
No, they taste
Do they actually taste it?
I've never tried it.
Can you get those non-com?
Yeah, they're like
Supercell.
there's like 15.
Well, what? So why are you going for a Snickers? Out of interest.
Just because I like it. I just want a bit of, I just want some carbs. It gives me a little bit of a boost, and I like it.
Yeah, fair enough.
I like eating chocolate.
Yeah.
Sue me.
Okay.
I'm probably the most normal eater here compared to you two freaks.
No, he's the one that eats roast chicken for breakfast.
Yeah, that is weird.
Still think that's completely normal.
Nah, you're wrong, mate.
Well,
Anyway.
listen, so I'm quite similar to you. I basically, once I've had that
Snickers?
lunch, not Snickers, but once I've had lunch, that's going to tie me over for dinner.
Yeah.
And essentially, I think I'm a very regimented 3 meal a day post workout shake, and that's pretty much it. But obviously, like I said, like my meals are probably, and my calorie intake is nowhere near as high as yours, and Paddy, we're probably quite similar, I think.
On a weekday.
On a weekday, yeah. You do Paddy's weekend.
Yeah.
We don't have enough time in the podcast to talk about what Paddy eats in a weekend. But again, I think going back to the topic of conversation for this podcast, which is meal timing. When you look at yourself versus myself, roughly the same calories in a day, but I'm having 3 meals in a shake. You're having
4 meals.
4, maybe even sometimes 5 with that snack in the middle and your post-workout shake. And having more than us, but splitting it into essentially 7 meals then a shake. And so I think, what is the general principle? What is the general protocol now that we can recommend to folks in terms of what's a good starting place? What's a simple starting formula that most folks could start with and then build from there?
I would actually say start with 3 meals a day of balanced meals where you're aiming for food quality, where it's balanced. Don't worry too much about like the protein, carb and fat ratio. Just create a meal that you think has good food sources in it, has like a decent amount of vegetables in it, has a good carb source in it, has a good protein source in it, has a good fat source in it. Consume those 3 times a day, and then see where you're at. And then if you feel like you're not eating enough food, you could maybe increase the portion sizes of those 3 meals. You could add in a shake. You could add in snacks. You could add in a 4th meal at a different time. Yeah. But I would say for the general population, especially someone, for example, a member or probably someone that listens to this podcast, more than likely is training once a day, 4 or 5 times a week tops. They don't need to be smashing 6 meals a day. Start with the basics, like we say with all of this, which is just balanced food 3 times a day, and then go from there. That's your foundation. Then if you need to complicate it as you go.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think if you can control the timing of breakfast, a lot of the time that's like the thing that everyone pretty much does at the same time, pretty much every day.
Yeah.
If you're a morning trainer,
Most controllable meal.
yeah, exactly. I think obviously we're in a very lucky situation here where we got a fridge right next to our office and right next to the gym. We can just store things. You know, people who are in offices or are constantly on the move, it's not so easy. So I mean, you can control your breakfast, make your breakfast, let's call it perfect, whatever perfect is for that person in terms of your
Well,
timing.
it goes back to calories in versus calories out, macronutrients.
Yeah, exactly. So then from there, you base your breakfast, and then you just got to look at the rest of your day. Are you gonna do, you know, what Ed had? You're gonna have 3-hour block. If so, meal timing's got to be before that. You can't be sitting through that 3 hours of whatever you're doing, starving. Do you know you're going out for dinner? Okay, well there's your third meal set. Do you think you might have to go out for drinks with clients or whatever it might be? Get food in before that, because you're probably not going to be having anything apart from beer and wine. So get your meal in there. So like you said, 3 meals as a box standard. Control the first one generally because that's what you can control, and the next 2 just make sure you get them in at some point.
I mean, I think society is set up for 3 meals a day.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we call it breakfast.
Especially Western.
Yeah, it's called breakfast.
Even though we're not even Western.
Yeah. It's called breakfast because you're breaking a fast, right? So it's the first meal of your day, and so society acknowledges that breakfast is an important part of the day. And then you've got lunch. Pretty much every company has a lunch break or encourages people to take a lunch break, and then the day finishes, you go home, we go out and have dinner. So I think, you know, if knowing that society is built around really those 3 meals, it makes sense to start there. Of course, like, you know, bringing this back to the food pyramid, first thing we would have all done is calculated, well, how many calories I need to be consuming. Of those calories now, how much are protein, how much are carbs, how much are fats. And then, like you said, it's kind of just looking at your day and knowing and understanding, well, there's a few things to consider. When are my opportunities to actually eat? And then, you know, also acknowledging like hunger signals. Some people aren't hungry in the morning, some people are generally nighttime feeders, like there is actually a genetic thing there, but it's also something I think can be manipulated and changed through routine and habit. So, you know, there's something you can probably change if you wanted to change that. So, you know, looking at that and factoring in for yourself. And for example, if you work in a job where client lunches and dinners are something that you have to take part in, or work-based lunch and dinners where now the timing of those meals is a little bit outside of your control. Like you said, nail your breakfast time, make sure that's something you never skip out on, and then you just got a bit more flexibility with your lunch and dinner, as long as you just kind of get the macronutrients and calories in.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've changed up a lot recently, or well, recently being within the last 2 years, is my final meal of the day. I know I used to, you know, I'd sometimes be like, oh, I didn't eat this lunchbox, I'd bring it home, and then I'd look at my fitness pal, because again I'm very regimented on what I'm following and what I'm doing, and I'm like, oh god, I've actually got so much to eat, and I'd end up basically heating that meal up, putting another 200 grams of rice on top of 250, and then more meat or a shake after the meal, and I'd basically lying in bed like a full gut of food. And again, at the time I was like, this is not a problem, I'm actually sleeping totally fine and it's not affecting me at all. But now I've gone the other way and been like, okay, my last meal is a minimum of an hour before, if not hopefully before that, before bedtime. Now my sleep has been so much better.
And there's a lot of science.
Yeah, just giving my body the time to actually just understand that it's just been loaded up with whatever I chuck into it. And just actually giving it time to actually digest it and break it down.
And I think, you know, circadian rhythms is something we talk about all the time. You know, if your body is used to, let's say, having a 6 o'clock dinner or a 7 o'clock dinner and a 10 p.m. bedtime, you know, the more, if you do that regularly, your body's going to start to think, okay, well, every time I have that last meal of the day, bedtime typically occurs 3 hours later. So if suddenly one day you push your meal time back an hour and a half, the likelihood is your bedtime may be pushed back an hour and a half as well. And it's pretty crazy how our bodies are just so wired like that.
And within that as well is that your hunger signals are dictated by hormones, leptin and ghrelin. So ghrelin is the hormone that gets released when it's telling you that you're hungry, and leptin is telling you that you're full. And if you usually have breakfast at 9 o'clock or something, or you usually have breakfast at 5 o'clock, 9 times out of 10 you're probably going to wake up, and if you haven't eaten 10-15 minutes after that time you normally eat, you're going to start to feel that hunger hormone saying, oh well, this is when we get food, we're expecting food. So like it's not necessarily your body saying we desperately need the food and the nutrients. It's more that your body is used to that rhythm. So it's saying we don't want to deviate from that. We want to make sure that we're having that meal that we're used to having.
Yeah. I was just going to say unless you got something else, Paddy.
I'll go off at the sidetrack.
Okay, I was going to say I think a good place to maybe wrap up what we're talking about here is just to really dive into whether they're myths or not myths, the timing of things like carbohydrates and protein in our day. Carbohydrates and protein probably being the two macronutrients people talk about the most, especially in the training circles. Carbohydrates is fueling our ability to exercise and train. Protein is fueling the ability for us to recover and adapt. So I know Dr. Huberman, we talk about him a lot. Paddy, we talk about him a lot in the office, puts out really great content. He just put up something to support the intake of protein early on in the day for lots of different benefits. But then there is now science to say that having protein in your breakfast, i.e. roast chicken, is actually is a really good thing. And then let's talk about carbohydrates. So let's talk about the breakfast meal. I think a lot of folks, generally speaking, breakfast time is generally more carbohydrate heavy meal. Yeah. Cereals, toast, jams, that kind of thing. Danishes, right? Yeah. But I mean, there is, if you're someone who's you're a training population, which most people listening to this is, thinking about spreading protein throughout your day, would you guys generally say is a good thing to do?
Yeah. And maybe not necessarily. I thought we've talked about this on the podcast before, on these nutrition episodes before, but usually your body can absorb between sort of 25 to 50 absolute top whack grams of protein, and use that effectively for protein synthesis. Anything more than that, then it still gets stored and used by the body, but it usually turns it into carbohydrate. So it's not that it's wasted, but you'd be better off using some more food as carbohydrate or fat, as opposed to trying to eat 100 grams of protein for your first meal.
Try to spread it out.
Yeah, so try and spread out those protein feedings throughout the day, like we talked about before, for benefits of protein synthesis.
Yeah. Carbohydrate timing may actually change a little bit throughout the day depending on your training time.
Yeah.
You guys want to just share any just general protocols there, things to think about? If you're someone who trains, let's say, first thing in the morning, early morning.
So I would actually say then the most important thing would be the evening before. Yeah, exactly. So you'd want to have a relatively carbohydrate dense meal towards bedtime. Your body can then process those carbohydrates overnight, get stored as muscle glycogen, and then your body, or in the liver, and then your body can then use that glycogen as an energy source in your morning workout.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry.
It can take it. I know that you can digest carbohydrates very quickly, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're able to use them that quickly.
And you will still be using some carbohydrates as you sleep.
Yeah.
But still, I think that's a good protocol if you're early morning. If you're a mid-morning person like us, then what would you guys say? Just a balanced meal of protein and carbohydrates in the morning is probably a good way to go.
I don't do anything too special, to be honest.
Okay, let's say you're at lunchtime. You train at lunchtime. Where are you stacking your carbs and proteins then? Let's talk about carbohydrates.
I would still say a carbohydrate heavy meal in the morning, and then you could always have a mid-morning carbohydrate snack. You could have a protein snack as well, but that's what we were talking about with the intra or BCAAs.
And it depends what training you do.
Yeah, true. So if that was if you're a lunchtime worker-outer, I would say maybe an hour to 90 minutes before, have some form of carbohydrate that's not too slow release, something like banana, piece of fruit, maybe even white rice, that kind of thing that gets relatively quickly digested that your body can then use.
Yeah. Mid-afternoon, where would you guys stack those carbohydrates a little more?
I'd still say morning.
I'd say breakfast similar to that other person that you just went through.
Yeah, I agree. And then we've got evening time.
I'd still do the same thing again, but lunchtime would probably be a balanced meal, and then maybe a pre-carb, pre-workout carb, like 60 to 90 minutes beforehand.
Yeah. Cool. So I think that was good just to give some people, based on which bucket they sit in, where to think about making timing something that can actually help you with training and recovery. And
then post, actually, talking about carbohydrate and protein, like we all talked about having a shake post-workout, and we've talked about this already, and we'll probably talk about it in the next episode with supplementation, but having a protein source post-workout means that you're getting a protein source within your anabolic window. Now, like people used to think, or people still probably think that like 30 to 60 minutes you need to get protein in. I think the research has quite categorically said now they like to say it's more of a door rather than a window. So it's more like within sort of like 2 to 3 hours you need to make off training, you need to make sure you're getting a protein source in that your body can then use to facilitate protein synthesis.
And again, back into context, if your calories aren't sorted and your macronutrients aren't sorted, don't even worry about that.
Yeah, exactly. And then carbs, again, your body is more sensitive to absorb carbohydrates as muscle glycogen where it gets stored in the muscle, as opposed to floating around the bloodstream or being stored in the liver, etc. So having carbs post-workout allows your body to then absorb those carbohydrates and get stored in the muscle, which is exactly why you're having that fast release and that fast release sugary dextrose.
70 grams, slam
Yeah,
in.
straight in.
I was going to say one last example, just kind of trying to think about our listeners and the scenarios that they might be in, is what about the folks who train late at night who often ask, I don't have time or I don't want to eat after my training session. So what they'll often do is they'll do a late night training session and then go straight to bed and wake up next day. What are your thoughts on that and any recommendations?
I would say that it's not hard to get in a protein shake with some like fast release carbs.
So I think your answer is don't do that. Try focus on trying to get something in post workout.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah.
It depends on the type of session, if I'm honest with you. If it's like a hard aerobic effort, then I'm gonna say you're gonna, same with Paddy, like you probably want something after it. If it's like a slower strength session, then you can probably even have your dinner before it, and then do the session if you're okay to sleep after a hard training session. I know I'm not personally, but if that's something you choose to do, that could be your option, and then a bigger breakfast in the morning.
Yeah, I think it depends. If they're having dinner within like 90 minutes or 2 hours before their training, then
and if it's whole foods, it's going to be
Exactly.
It's going to be
Slowly
digested.
released.
Yeah, that is slowly anyway.
Yeah.
So by the time they finish their session, they may be assimilating that protein and carbohydrate anyway.
yeah,
But I think if folks are thinking about eating after, then try to get it in probably as soon as you can after you finish your training session, so you don't get any carryover into disrupting sleep.
nice. We've got another podcast to go, listeners. So this is part 4 of 5. Next time you're tuning in for part 5, we're going to be talking about supplementation, which is the top point of the pyramid. So
the bottom of a lot of people's pyramids.
yeah, true. Yeah, just hammering through protein shakes and creatine.
Guilty.
I know you've got it pretty together. Right?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for coming, guys.
Thank you, Paddy. Hey, great to have you back, Paddy. We missed you.
I feel great.
Tired.
No, I'm good. I'm doing great. Tune in next time, team. See ya.
Charles made.
Osmo.
Well done, Paddy. Well done, Anne.
Good work.
Yes.
You get the intro.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Live, Perform, Compete podcast.